So in this lesson, we're going to be finalizing the application. We're going to be adding in the ability to search and then also applying some styling to the application. So now that we have an option to search, we can enter in a search term, click, and we get now new results according to the search term. And then you can click these as just we did before and get additional details. So let's try to search for HTML. Returns back the HTML contents corresponding to the title search, and CSS we can also search for. So this is what we're returning back for responses for the CSS search. And there's a lot of information that is coming back from the API. So I do encourage you to try out different requests, different paths, and also output data that's being returned back from the API onto the web page. So let's get started. So let's make a search, and in order to search, we can search within the title, we can search within the page, also setting the maximum results. So in this case, we're just going to do a search for JavaScript within the title, and again, you can build out your parameters and the endpoint URL for Stack Exchange here within the API stackexchange.com. So that's all we've done here is we've built up and created the new parameters, that the new endpoint that we want to connect to. And we want to make this connection whenever the search is initiated. So going into where we're setting and where have the click event. So we're going to make a search and return back the content according to what's within the search results. Let's also make some updates to the text content of the H1. And we can just call this the Stack Exchange API or something like that. So updating the title, API, tester, and just capitalize that so that we've got some information on what we're tracking there. And then also for the button 1 and for the H1, let's move these contents into another element output, and we can create this one through that make node generator that we set up in the earlier lesson. And this is just going to be appended to the document body, and it's going to append the contents there. So appending to the document body, and the element type is going to be a div, and then the contents is just going to be blank content. So this will serve as our main container, and we can add into output 1, we can append the H1 object, and then as well additionally we can append the input value as well. So just moving some stuff around on the page with JavaScript. And then also we'll move the button in there as well. And also append the button element. And I'll just see how that looks. That's moving it actually to the bottom of the page. So also let's drop the output element into it as well. And for this, what we're going to do is for output 1, let's add in a class and give it a class of output 1. And so we'll center it, and then text align can be center aligned for the text. And then apply that class. So using the class list, and then add the class of output 1 to that element. So that will center the content. Let's also update the input field. I really just have the one input field, as well as the element with a class of button, or we could update the element with the button tag. So let's make the input field bigger. and we'll display them both as blocks. And width can be 100%. And let's set the font size to a fairly large font size. And then default height. And also, if we want, we can do text align to center. Then you can update these as needed. So whenever we click the button, we want to make the fetch request and load the page content. So let's update that to load the page content. So we've got the endpoint here that we want to connect to. So just as we've done before, where we construct the URL we want to use for the fetch request, we're going to grab the search term. So right now it's JavaScript, and we can get the search term. And that can come from the input value. So getting that element value, and this is going to be whatever the search term is. So let's update this string value. And instead of JavaScript, it'll use whatever the search term is. So that's going to construct the basic URL. And then we can make the fetch to the URL and return back the promise, so the response object, and the response, return it as JSON, and then get it as a value of data. And then from there, we'll output the data contents into the console. So let's see what happens when we search for test. And that returned back an array of items. So we can loop through each one of these items. And output them to the page. So data, items. And I'm also going to update the input value to have a value. So let's set that to JavaScript. So now we're returning back all of these items. So ready to just load them to the page. So just as we did the output items, could do the data items and output them to the page. So doing a search for JavaScript is going to return back the JavaScript associated content. And then you can click on it and find out more details about it. And then we can have another search if we want. So search for HTML. So it returns back the HTML content. And then just as we did with the others, we can click it to get more details, see what the answers are. And then we could even load the answers and the information as well as additional content that's contained within the API. So all of that is available to us to add to the page. And as you're practicing and connecting to the API, the endpoints, you can try out different ways and different content to output on the page depending on what the selection is. And this is a fairly extensive API. There's a lot of content here. There's a lot of different endpoints, and there's a lot of different ways to interact with it. So you can try out and check out all the different options here within the Stack Exchange API. Challenge for this lesson is to continue to practice with the Stack Exchange API. Check out some of the different endpoints, load the data onto your page and update the page contents, adding in a search term option, so searching within the title terms, and you can create your path to the API within the API documentation available at the stackexchange.com docs. Also load more JSON data, dynamically update the page elements, add styling and classes to the elements, and overall get a good opportunity to practice requesting content and returning it, and then manipulating the page elements to represent the content that's come back from the JSON.